Hello, welcome everybody. Oh, hello, welcome everybody. Welcome back at Conservatorium Maastricht, where we are doing our second day of Jazz Master presentations. Today we're going to start with the master presentation of Sophia Lefebvre, and we will start with her presentation video now.
Welcome. Today I will give you an insight into my master thesis. I try to give you an overview of how the thoughts about my research developed, how they changed, and what results I came to. I have always been very interested in the variety of vocal sounds. In order to produce different sounds, a combination of muscle contractions and cartilage tilts must happen. Many different vocal techniques postulate certain movements. I wanted to have a scientific evidence of what happens in the body and how the resulting sound is expressed. My first idea for my master research was that I wanted to design an app that, by singing into it, would tell the user what they change in the body to produce that sound. To get to the process of being able to develop such an app, the preparation work is crucial. How can this question be answered, and which tools are necessary to be able to make a statement about it? Sounds are formed by different settings in the vocal tract. So how can I make a connection between the muscular process and the sounds? Since I don't have the possibility to look at the vocal folds and the muscular contractions and cartilage movements with a medical doctor in an MRI or another measuring method, I had to find another way. For this reason, I had the idea of looking at the physical and visible sound alone in order to be able to determine variations and changes in the sound pattern. For this reason, I bought the program Voce Vista Video Pro and started to record different sounds. By the Fourier transformation, a sound signal is decomposed into its frequency components. The program works with this Fourier transformation and makes all frequencies visible that are present in the sound. A sound is not a single tone like a sine tone, but a whole collection of single partials. These partials are also called harmonics or overtones. However, the way of counting differs. If I speak of partials, then the first partial is the fundamental and not the first overtone. My first experiment included different parameters to change the sound. I wanted to permute these parameters at the beginning. For example, the shape of the lips, the opening of the mouth, the position of the tongue, the position of the jaw, the position of the soft palate, the different position of the larynx, the tilting of different cartilages, the cricoid cartilage and the thyroid cartilage, the tilting of the epiglottis, which is called twang, and the closure of the vocal folds like breathy, pressed, soft, and glottal. All permutations should be sung on at least 4 different pitches to get a reference in the different register of the voice. These permutations alone produce several thousand possibilities. In addition, vowels must be chosen in order to produce the sound at all. If the German vowels like a, e, I, o, u are added, this increases the permutations many times over. In fact, during the initial tests, I noticed that the quality of the vowels changed when certain vocal parameters were added. So if I try to sing an a with different parameters, I do not get the same a. It differs in directness and indirectness, and how dark or light the vowel sounds. For this reason, and to group and limit the parameters and permutations, I looked at the phonetics and the vowels. The parameters for the lips, mouth, tongue, and jaw can be determined based on the individual vowels, since they are produced the same, specific to the vowel in question. The vowel diagram shows where the vowel are located in the oral cavity. For the cardinal vowels, I made a list. Here you can see the distinction in front tongue vowels, central vowels, and back tone vowels. I also added front tongue nasal vowels and back tongue nasal vowels, although they are not used in the German language. I added them because here the soft palate parameter is needed and I wanted to look at the changes that will occur. The vowels that are positioned opposite to each other are produced identically, with the only difference that the lips are either rounded or unrounded. Some vowels that appear here in the list are not used in the German language, but I have listed them anyway to have a lip equivalent in each case. The difference in tongue height can be so minimal that it can be very subjective when someone recognizes an I or an E, for example. It depends on one's origin, dialect, and habit. For this reason, the experiments are a subjective one now and based on mind pronunciation and perception. My thought was, if I sing the same vowel with different vocal parameters and the sound changes, does also the vowel itself change? To answer this question, I had to look at the formants of the vowels. Formants are energy peaks in the spectrum. They are vowel-specific in a certain frequency range. Formant 1 and Formant 2, F1 and F2, define the respective vowel. The program Voce Vista Video Pro has an integrated vowel diagram which shows an average value of the formants and their vowels. I sang the German cardinal vowels with vocal fry. The technique vocal fry makes the energy peaks clearer, but the partials are overlaid by the noise and are no longer clearly visible. This makes it easier to read the energy peaks and shows the frequency range of the formants. I sang the vowels once and put the cursor on the average as a reference to see if my pronunciation matches the average. Then I put the cursor on my energy peaks to see how the place of the vowels changes in the vowel diagram. The values of some vowels were not completely identical. This could be a result due to my pronunciation or the normal values. In order to see in which frequency ranges the standard values lie in relation to the pitches, I created a chart. It is clear to see that the vowels that have serial F1 or F2 that require, for example, a high tongue position or a low larynx position. These parameters change the perception of the sound. Since an E in a normal pronunciation has a different sound than an E with a lowered larynx, according to my theory, no real E can be sung with a low larynx because the quality of the vowel changes. According to my subjective perception, I pronounced the vowels in a pronunciation that was correct or normal for me and found that the position of the larynx goes up rather than down. For this new darker E with the larynx going down, a new place in the vowel diagram would have to be found. For this reason, in order to stay with the original vowels, I left out the larynx position. Because here the vowel quality changes directly and I lose the reference to the vowel when I compare combinations of the parameters. I created a list for my experiments and only considered individual parameters for the vowels. The first parameter is the change of the lips and the same phonation. These are the vowels that are opposite to each other in the vowel diagram, such as I and Ü. Then I added the parameter nasalization, because here only in comparison the soft palate changes, as for example with O and The next parameter is the thyroid tilt, which I abbreviate as tilt. The thyroid is tilted and changes the length of the vocal folds. To me, this makes the sound much more indirect than a sound without tilt. The last parameter is the tilting of the epiglottis, which is called twang. The sound becomes more pointed and sharper. In order to not only perform the experiments on the same tone, I choose 4 different pitches. This results in 192 different images in the spectrogram and spectrum. The spectrogram and spectrum. As I have already mentioned, in the program Voce Vista Video Pro, the sound is separated into its single frequencies by the means of the Fourier transformation and represented in the spectrogram and spectrum. In the spectrogram, the time progression and consequently the sound development is shown. The colored lines are the partials of the sound. The distances between the partials are determined by the overtone series and are always the same. The intensity of the colors represents how weakly or strongly the partials are present. The blue area between the partials can represent air or noise in the sound, and in this area the color can change too when either silence or a lot of noise is present. The spectrum shows the sound at a particular time. The partial intensity is shown by the length. The longer the partial, the more intense the signal was for that partial. I looked at the pictures of the experiments and initially tried to listen to each individual partial with a frequency filter to see immediate differences in intensity. The higher the frequency ranges and their partials become, the worse they are perceived. Above a certain range, the partials are no longer displayed. Even the perception of the partials is subjective. The longer you listen to individual partials, the more clearly individual tones are perceived. I realized that this method will not be useful for this work, so I changed my approach. I divided the experiments into groups and tried to recognize the same structures or patterns. The first group included lip rounding. These, for example, are all about the vowels I, E, U, O, and their opposite lip pendants, Ü, Ö, Hö, Hö, while Ü and Ö are achieved with lip rounding. The lips are opened for Hö and Hö. Since these both do not occur in German, my pronunciation may not be correct. Therefore, I ignore these vowels. As an example, I show the pictures of E and Ö. The spectrogram shows clear holes. These reflect the intensified or weakened areas. While the vowel shaping area is intensified in one vowel, it is weakened in the other, and the other way around. So it is in the other ranges as well. If one frequency range is more partone poor or noise poor, the opposite is true for the other vowel. When the lips are rounded, the shape of the spectrum seems much straighter and less curvy than when the lips are opened. The next example is nasalization. If we now switch between oral and nasalized, it becomes clear that the formant F2, which is strongly developed due to the articulation position, E position, is considerably reduced in the nasalized I. If one now tries to find the energy peaks for I, the range of formants is found in a different frequency range. Both F1 and F2 become weaker. A strong damping of the partials in the range of above 1500 Hz can also be seen. Using the cursors, I try to capture the new energy peaks. The new energy peaks also show a new place in the vowel diagram. Based on my subjective perception, I determined the place for I. In order to see how complete nasality expresses itself in the spectrum, I will sing a sound that sounds only through the nose due to the completely closed soft palate. Relatively many partials are dampened in complete nasality. You can see that in the blue area and the white square. I have marked the energy peaks that occur with a red circle in the vowel diagram. On closer inspection, it is noticeable that for the nasalized and the completely nasal sound the formant F1 is the same for both. And even with a normal E, F1 is almost exactly in the same place. The connection of all three versions can be read here. The next group is the tilt. Here the full spectrum using a sung sound on the vowel R is shown. One difference in sound that results from tilt compared to a sound without tilt is, for example, that especially the areas between the partials are dampened and lose their intensity. The white border in the spectrum reflects the normal sound. The colored spectrum represents the tilt sound in direct comparison. In the spectrogram, a blue line can be seen in the upper frequency range, which is drawn sharply downward over time. This is where the change in technique happens. The blue line symbolizes that there is a lower intensity of partials in these areas. In the spectrogram, it is also easy to see that the yellow color between the red partials loses color over time. This means that at these points, even the intermediate frequencies, the noise components in the sound, decreases. In the spectrum, this is marked by the red circle. The black part that appears there is the decrease in intensity compared to the R without tilt. The shape of the spectrum, the partial intensity, remains relatively the same, although in some places the intensity of some partials also decreases. The intensity of the fifth partial compared to the other partials is greatly reduced, the red box. In the spectrogram, however, it can be seen over time that this partial is still present when the technique is changed. In order to find out whether fixed individual partials change in each case or only the underlying frequency range, the difference would have to be examined with several singers using different pitches. The crucial thing with this technique is that the intermediate frequencies between the partials are greatly dampened, which would also be sonically consistent with this explanation. Twang. In the twang technique, the entrance to the larynx is narrowed by lowering the epiglottis. During the swallowing process while eating, the epiglottis flips down and closes the larynx. This prevents food from entering the trachea. If this movement is used in singing, the sounds becomes louder and also shriller. Observations on example A, E, and E. The first column is a sung B flat on the vowel A, first normal and then with twang. The straight lines again mark the formant range of A. You can see that the noise part is increased between the partials. The partials also increase in intensity with twang. Most important, the area where the formants of the vowel are located is amplified. Look at the black circle. Comparison with other vowels confirm this picture. In this image, the vowel E is sung. First normally, few noise components between the partials, then with twang. In this sound, the formant region of E is not on A partial, yet this intermediate frequency is strongly intensified. In this case, the image even shows red components instead of the yellow shading, which speaks for a strong intensity. If the spectrogram is viewed vertically in its entire length, the general increase in intensity is noticeable. In this figure, articulation on the vowel E, the formant region is again highlighted. All intermediate frequencies, the partials, and also the formant areas of the respective vowel are amplified. This is a very clear picture in the spectrogram and in the spectrum. Experiments I conducted were evaluated in the final analysis based on the formant ranges of the vowels and the noise component between the partials. At the beginning of this work, I used frequency filters to listen to each partial and try to determine the difference with changes in technique. For some sounds, the first partials were much more clearly heard separately than for other sounds. However, since the perception of these is again subjective, I needed a new strategy. Using the vowels was important to determine where the formants of these vowels were located and how they differed from each other. By looking at the formant areas, the spectra could be better divided and changes could be read more quickly. An important insight I gained from the work is the importance of the frequencies, the noise between the partials. The influence of these frequencies significantly affect the sound design. This could be illustrated by the example of the technique tilt. If their intensity decreases, so does the clarity or also the directness in the sound. The louder these frequencies become, however, the sharper and squeakier the sound became, which could be observed in the twang example. In the experiments on the formant ranges with vocal fry, the vowel was heard with a large amount of noise. As a result, partial tone peaks are recognized, but the partial tone color, which ultimately provides the sound of the voice, is covered by buzzing here. Therefore, the partials stand out less clearly and are masked by the intermediate noise. Nevertheless, the experiments with vocal fry helped to find new formant ranges for the nasalized vowels. In this case, the change nasalization resulted in a vowel change that also caused a change in the original vowel place for E in the vowel diagram due to the new formant areas that were found. What was also interesting, but which I did not discuss in this paper, even though it was done in the experiment, is that the nasalized sounds do not work in pitch with tilt. If an attempt is made to tilt the nasalized sound, the soft palate opens and the sound unintentionally becomes oral again. However, to be able to give more precious information on this, the experiment would have to be carried out with considerably more subjects. The pedagogical aspect behind this work is to create a program that evaluates the spectra and provides the student or teacher with a translation of their own voice. This should become the preliminary work for an app. Since I have not studied all the parameters, these would also need to be considered in further research. Also, this knowledge could lead to a singing concept based on the form and ranges of the vowels. This involves the transitions of vowels that are close together like E and E. After I listened to many vowels based on the vowel diagram F1 and F2 in unison and sang to them, a clear difference was immediately felt and heard when the sung note corresponded to the F1 of the vowel or was in the partial of the form and range. I would like to make this feeling of the formants on the basis of intensified sound clearer in a different framework and sketch out a concept for it. I refer here to the illustration of the formants and the pitches I showed. Based on this work, it became much clearer to me how important the vowels can be for music and interpretation. It is not just about different sounds that can be recalled spontaneously, but about filling the vowels with sound. The vowel is the basis of the sound. Looking away from the technique to the word and thus to the interpretation raises the text again to a new level. And that's what's music all about, telling stories and creating feelings through it. Using the vowels and their vowel modifications, I would like to create a new vocal language in singing for myself. Not the sound, but the color of the vowel should be in the foreground. For this reason, I would like to get to know more vowels from other languages and include them in my repertoire, both in the in the analysis of the partial spectrum and the format ranges and in the practical implementation of the artistic procession in my own piece. In doing so, I do not want to fall back on the everyday syllables, but to define each vowel in relation to a word or a feeling or other meaning. This means that I want to design a new language in the truest sense of the words on the basis of the vowels. Since I want to take these from different languages, it is not only the music that connects people, but also the diversity and yet familiarity of this new language. Similar to what was already mentioned in the pedagogical approach, I therefore want to design scales that correspond in their tone sequence to the F1 of the respective vowel. For this work, however, I need more time and possible other vowels or a darkening or lightening of the initial vowels, which may require different singing techniques. I would like to translate these new places in the vowel diagram into notes to create a new kind of vocal improvisation or vocal language in general. Through this research, I have developed a great interest in phonetics in the context of singing. I plan to continue working on this topic with my focus on other languages as well as other traditional singing techniques. When the vowel O is reshaped into a O by opening the lips and then nasalize it, I was able to intensify the first partials in the spectrum by deforming the lips. Overtones of various intensities emerged that could be clearly heard polyphonically. I had never tried these overtone singing before. Decisive for this were the various experiments I made. To continue with it, I need to add several parameters and create new permutations. For example, the different voice onsets need to be recorded, the cricoid tilt and the low or high position of the larynx. All parameters should be permuted and then analyzed using all possible vowels that exist in the world. Nevertheless, the essential thing for me is the constant reference to the formants. For example, it is more difficult or hardly possible to articulate an U on high notes because the formants for the U are lower. Furthermore, it is possible to determine a difference between laryngeal positions based on the formants because the quality of the vowel changes. For example, the formant area F2 drops when the vowel A is sung with a low laryngeal setting. Both the color of the vowel and the formant range become lower. Based on these comparisons, I would like to design a new vowel diagram. The newly found values for F1 and F2 should be displayed in the diagram. Thus, if these formants are hit on a trial, then it can be concluded that the trial was sung with a different, in this case, deeper laryngeal setting, similar to what I did with the nasalized "y." For a comprehensive study, it is necessary to analyze several things. Whistle tones I did not discuss in this paper, but I would like to address them in a more advanced paper. From the spectrogram and spectrum, you can clearly see if it is a whistle tone or if it's just a high-pitched sound. The pure tone in this context is really a single sign tone that vibrates without partials. The high-pitched sound, however, still has partials that resonate. Based on the new vowel diagram, I think it's possible to design an app. Therefore, the position of the formants are important. Changes must be recorded on the basis of the new positions in the vowel diagram. The research I have done in this thesis has already had an impact on how I re-evaluate sound and vocal technique in relation to the vowel. Therefore, I would like to clarify and share the knowledge I have gained through further research. Therefore, the clarity of vowel quality and the knowledge that the vowel can change in aesthetics due to technique is an improvement for text understanding in both pedagogy and artistic practice. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Welcome back. Thank you for a great presentation. We are back at the live room at Conservatorium Maastricht for the Q&A. I would like to invite Sophia Lefebvre to stand at the mic so we can ask her some questions. This one you can take. That's for the audience. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, you feel free to adjust the height. Very nice presentation, very technical work you have done. And basically, I guess we can all say that it's only a step of your path, the way you have jumped into this. And it has a slight deviation from what we've usually seen in terms that you have a little bit less of the artistic approach and a little bit more the educational approach in your research, which is important to note. Mm-hmm. Also in how we approach thinking about it, right? However, you've managed to find also some more artistic application towards, I think, towards the end of the process, such as this final thing about wanting to design a language based on this. I would like to start my question about that. What are your ideas about that? Can you elaborate a little bit?
The first idea was that there are a lot of vowels, not only in the German language, but also in English, that there is an E, E, something like that. But also in the Mongolian language, there was this something like that. And my idea was that every sound and thus vowel gives you another feeling about what it should tell you. So if I sing something, it's not just like ooh, but every vowel can address a different word. So that perhaps the ah is always for me. It depends on my character. The oh is the you. So that I want to create with all the different vowels. So just not the vowels we know for this moment. that they can tell a story. So that there is the feeling about love, which is, for example, an something like that, and that you can shape the story all around those vowels. So this could be one artistic thing about the language, but also when I want to talk about the formants, I think maybe it's something else for this artistic approach, that you have different formants, as I told. You have the F1, you have the F2, and they when you sing an A on this specific F1, so the first partial is on this formant, then there is a better connection to yourself, because as you can I think you saw it, that of course the F1 is in a specific frequency range, and of course the tones, they can go up and down because you're not always singing on the same partial. And this can also be something like an artistic idea, that you design these scales, that when there are the formants F1, F2, not F1, always F1, and that you can see, okay, this F1 is on this hertz frequency, and this is always the A, for example. And then the E is always on the frequency in the next parameter. So if you have a scale C, D, E, F, then you have to look at the formants, which formants are in this frequency, that you get the real feeling of, now I'm sitting into that frequency. Because of course you can sing all the vowels, but the vowels and the interharmonic noise is then in between. So do you some kind get of the idea that you switch down to the real F1?
Yeah, so basically you're sort of, I guess it's sort of like getting to the core of your voice in essence.
Yes, and of course to the scale. So when
Right.
I sing, then these syllables are festgelegt, are determined. So when you sing these scales in this register, then you have always the same vowels. It's like do, re, mi, fa, so, but with the formant behind it.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, it's very technically approached, and then you want to link it back to language, which is very charged, right? It's actually a really interesting question. I really wonder where that search will take you. But what about one more question from me? Then we please do throw yourselves in. But what about at this point already the artistic application for you? Can you, for instance, now in your upcoming final exam program, what tools do you feel you gained from this research? Are there things?
Of course, the vowel quality, because when you sing something without text, and I think this is very important as well for singers, that it's not just becoming 3-4 different vowels, because it's always the same, that you get more self-improvement of how you can change the sound. And it can be with overtones, it can be that there is something with the soft palate, that it gets some nasalization, but it's always some kind of wavy oscillation, that it's not just always the same, but in itself it changes. So therefore the parameters are necessary, and also the vowel quality itself, and also that we are not limited in just the words or the vowels we know. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. Anyone else wants to jump in with a question? I'm looking around. Yeah.
Maybe one question would be, do you have like favorite artists that probably use certain techniques, so that you got aware of that there are the possibilities of how you pronounce a word, how you work with vowels and with sound in your voice?
I must say, not really, but while doing this research, then I was very interested in the Mongolian singing, and then you it's just traditional things. So I think the way will bring me down to traditional music, because there it is not about technique, but the some sounds are determined also to your language and how you pronounce it. And so this is very interesting. Or when I listen to Bulgarian music, then you have a very specific sound quality there. So I don't want to say that, okay, this is my personal thing, I love this one, but I think it's the combination of different lands and traditional chants that. So I don't want to focus on just one artist. So I think it's the culture of every land that could be worshipped with the sound.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we have also, of course, you have been guided by your master coach Sabine Kulich, who has recently been replaced by Helen Svoboda. And she has an online question, which you will be hearing, maybe not seeing, but you will hear her. Please go ahead, Helen.
Hi, everyone. Great presentation, Sophia. So awesome. Yeah, I guess I have two questions about the pedagogical application that you were talking about. So first of all, I guess I'm interested to know if this is something that you would introduce to like beginner vocalists early on, this translation of sound as a vocalist, or do you consider this to be more applicable to tertiary level and advanced? I guess I'll start with that question first, if that makes sense.
Yes. I think you can see it in both ways, because of course I'm doing all the techniques and parameters a long time, so it's a lot of things are based in my training, and I know what to do to produce that. But I think that because of the vowels, you don't have to rely on a different technique, because some vowels just give you all the parameters to go there. So I think it can be a concept for people who are interested in sound, but also in the languages, and therefore you don't have to be a great singer to achieve this, because as I told about the overtone singing or the languages, when you have the certain vowels and you can pronounce them, then you get also the technique which lies behind it. So I think it can be also a concept for those just for the vowels. So you don't have all the parameters, they just happen there, but you don't have to explain all things, but also for people who really want to go into the artistic field and experience their sound, their technique in relation to the vowels and the language.
Great, yeah, that's awesome. And one more just kind of personal question for you. I guess I'm interested to know if you did touch on, the use of words and how you've studied all the vowels so in depth now, but I'm interested to know if for you, your concept of like lyrics or your own pronunciation of lyrics has drastically changed, or you find that you're just hyper aware of how you're pronouncing words as a vocalist now when you're improvising or singing a standard or anything like that.
Hope I get it right. So do you mean that that my approach to the words changed?
Yeah, I guess, that's a good way to put it. If your approach to lyrics and the pronunciation of lyrics has changed significantly for you.
Definitely. Now when I look at the words, it's like, okay, you can shape the words in different parameters. Perhaps if you have near, then of course you have the E, near, but you have also the R coming down. And of course when you have techniques that the E is very not so good for this pitch, the high pitches, so that you can change the word some kind of around and start with near, not like that, but that you can change the word in how can I say it, that you make it easier for yourself as well, that the technique will work, but also the other way around, that you don't make it easy for yourself, because changing the word is like in the high that you're not saying me, but you're saying meh. You can see it in a lot of vocal songs, that you really concentrate on the real spoken word and not change to make it easier for yourself, but then take the risk of losing the technique perhaps, but that you can really lay out the real word and not just the technique behind it. So it's always, I think it's always a question, the technique and you feel it, or really the word. And if the technique is behind there, cool, but the text understanding is more important. So I think you can divide it into 2 parameters there.
Awesome. Thank you. Excellent answer.
Right. Any questions from the live room here? Anyone? Yeah, Julia. We're kind of used to Julia having questions.
I'm the volunteer student representative. Congratulations. That was a very thorough analysis of so many parts of your own voice, and that must have been a pretty confronting process with yourself. So congratulations for working through that. One thing I learned about you by watching not only how you represent all of these sounds and worked with the spectrographs and stuff, but also how you've been speaking about them with your hands, is that it's a very spatial thing for you, right? Like you feel these spaces between different partials, and I'm wondering if you could just describe in maybe an abstract kind of way how it feels to you to sing as the same vowel sound with different spaces between them. Is it like you see a spectrograph in your head, or do you feel like it's close to you and it's far away from you, or however?
I think I'm feeling some kind of the room in my head. So of course when I see a spectrogram or a spectrum, then it's clearer to me where the formants are, and okay, now I see the whole. This is some kind of closer position with the mouth, because then you have another shape of the spectrogram, or also with the noises in there. You can see there the blue area in between. Then some things I see because I did them, and I sing in and see that. But also when I through all this process, it's like feeling the space in your body. So when I hear someone sing, then I don't look, of course, at the spectrogram. I also did that because it's interesting. But I try to mirror the neurons and try to feel how this person feels, and then you can see, okay, now it's going somewhere in this direction, or you can see or feel that the larynx going down or up. So it's a very body. It's a body kind of thing to analyze, and also to feel the rooms and the spaces. Cool. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. You realize what an amazing kind of intelligence this is, to be able to feel these involuntary muscles in your body with such precision. It's really amazing. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Any more questions here in the room? Okay. Yeah, Greg, go ahead.
There is one YouTube question. Yes, from Sebastian Start, and maybe I'll just read it. So. Hallo Sophia, interessantes Thema. I have one question. Doesn't the sound of the vowels not also change through the posture and the breath? Why it not included? Or why it wasn't included, I guess. Greetings from Berlin. Did you get the question?
Again,
no.
Sorry.
So, doesn't the sound of the vowels not also change through the posture and breath? This is his question.
Posture and breath.
Yeah, posture and breath.
Yeah, and sort of the question of whether you included that in your research and what role it played, I think.
Why it wasn't, I guess. was not included. He
Yeah, at
asked,
least he
I guess.
assumes that you didn't include it. But
Yes.
elaborate on
This one,
that.
no, I understand.
Okay.
Let's see if Sebastian's right.
So the posture, how I stand here, I didn't include, and at first I with the breath, it's also a kind of onset on the vowels. So as I told in the presentation, there are different kinds of how the vowels can touch each other, and because this permutes everything 1,000 times, I did not do it. So of course I know that some vowels are easier with breathy kind of whoo, or it's like ah, wow. It's another attack, and it's also it makes the research much more bigger. But this is of course the idea that I start here and then build all the parameters together. But that's why I didn't what is it? I did not do the attacks in the research, but I wanted to lay out that they are there, and that you can see a lot there, because breathy means that there are more interharmonic noises, and when there is more smooth or glottal attack, that these noises were dampened or are dampened.
Yeah, clear. So they were basically limiters, right?
Yeah.
To make it. So maybe as a follow-up on that, which would be your first next step, do you think? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, it's the vowel diagram, because I want the vowel diagram on one side, but also the steps leading there, because with tilt there's also it's not just the interharmonic noise that is dampened, but it's also the formants going down. Sorry. So when you have these formants and then you permute it into tilt, then they go down, and then when you lift the larynx also down, then it goes down again. So I want to do a separation when where's the frequency range of the formants for tilt exactly, and where is it for the larynx going down, to separate these two parameters. And then when you saw the vocal diagram, you have all the different points. I wanted to do some kind of directions around these vowels. So this is the high position, this is the down position, because it's of course not just going down, it's also going in different spaces, in not just vertical or horizontal, but when you go with the larynx down, I also tried those, then it's coming like a 45 grad. Yeah, 45 degrees. It's so I want to do the vowels in this diagram, but see where exactly can I position it, and then of course it's always the next step, the tilt, the larynx going down, then the onsets, offsets, and then of course all the permutations together, because at first I also did all permutations together, that there is the tilt and there's the twang, and then there's the onset with glottal. And it drives you crazy because you're just one person and there are thousands of parameters. So limit yourself and then try to put some things together which can make it clearer, and then see, okay, does it make sense? Where can I go to further research? But I think the first thing is the difference between those, and see a direct place in the diagram.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that you're facing, that every AI researcher, I think, is facing. Like, where do I start and what do I start with? Yeah. And how do I limit a research so that it helps me with something and it gets me some kind of a result, whichever step it is, right? So it's like that. It's very, I would just, it's very, I would say, surprising that you jump into this realm while doing an artistic studies. You know, it's like, whoa, that's such an intense thing to do right now. But I think it will benefit very much your next. We have a question. Great, you can already walk to your mic. So it's, I mean, it's very interesting that you do it already. you know, following up probably the wish of more academic direction, possibly, right? So, yeah, I would really love to see how that progresses hand in hand, you know? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. We have one more question from Tim. Go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, this just popped into my mind, but have you considered to use computer learning software to analyze those spectrograms? Because you've said there are so many parameters to consider that it's really hard to focus on something or to get an overview, and this is something that computer learning is really made for, right? So it could maybe help you. I don't know, it's kind of an open question.
Yeah, you are right. But the thing is, at first you have to settle the parameters. So of course the computer can say you there are the energy peaks. So this is my idea behind that. So the vowels are determined by their energy peaks on the F1 and F2. But for that you have to clear that where are the formants in different techniques. So when the computer knows okay, the F1 is there and the F2 is here, then you get a sound with an A and with tilt. So the familiar work is that I try to concentrate on the formants to say these are here, these are my frequency ranges, and then the computer can read it, yeah, something like this, yeah.
All right, thank you. Really good work.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're gonna have to wrap up the Q&A, and we are going into jury recess. I want to thank you once more for your great presentation. Thank you. We will be back at 3 o'clock Central European summertime with the next presentation. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry for the small delay. We are back with the second research presentation, which will be a presentation video by Gustavo Andrés Jaramillo Pimentel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this master research presentation, Jazz and Bullerengue. The main purpose of this research is to find a musical concept resolved from the connection between the languages I feel identified with, which I will be directly connected to the opportunity it brings to have a musical product which I could introduce myself to the scenes of jazz, world music, Colombian folkloric, and any other scene it could fit into. This would also be connected to the common desire among the participants of my Town Fest band, which was my first approach to music, and which has generated a sense of responsibility to keep these traditions alive, to give them visibility and development by all its members. As I mentioned before, my first approach to music was through my small Town Fest band. As time went by and due to the participation of my father as arranger and conductor in this fest band called Santa Cecilia in the municipality of San Pedro in the region of Valle del Cauca. This band, even we are geographically in a different region away, it's culturally influenced from the Colombian's Atlantic coast region, which is located in the northern part of the country, and it's characterized by the development created from a connection between indigenous melodies and African heritage rhythms, dances, and chants. The part of that development that we include in our first band repertoire are rhythms and genres such as porro, cumbia, gaita, and chandé. All of them part of the Caribbean broad rhythms variety. Participating in this band contributed significantly to my musical development, and although the band was not specifically set up with the traditional ensemble, as it was already a result of the development given in the 30s decade. The ensemble format of the band was characterized by having a complete wind section with instruments such as trumpets, euphoniums, trombones, tubas, saxophones, clarinets, and flutes, and a section of percussion instruments, namely bass drum, congas, timbales, güiro, snare, and cymbals, which each one of those are played separately. The main challenge was to focus on the broad and complex format of the band in order to achieve a structural orchestration and arrangement that would allow the characteristical colors and texture of the format to shine through, while at the same time retain simplicity in its melodic movement and harmonic context. When referring to the development of these musical traditions in larger wind ensembles, it is necessary to mention Lucho Bermúdez, this multi-instrumentalist composer and one of the main references when talking about Colombian music, who by sharing directly with the great Benny Goodman and Count Basie, strongly influenced his trajectory to take these Caribbean musical traditions into the big band or large ensemble formats that later became established as the typical fest band formats, as it's the case of the San Pedro Fest Band. The connotation or main purpose of this connection, the traditional Colombian Atlantic music in large ensembles, was aimed at music for people to dance, music for dance halls. This is due to the fact that in the 1930s, traditional music was considered to be relegated to the realm of celebration and festivities, which is why it was also considered to be a symbol of national identity. In this way, the construction of my musical process was a product of this development in diverse rhythms and genres from the Atlantic coast, namely before such as cumbia, porro, gaita, fandango, bullerengue, and mapalé. Thus, I acquire particular qualities typical of the Caribbean rhythmic vocabulary, with the purpose to get closer to the root where all these genres and rhythms mentioned before have nourished and constructed from. I was fortunate to have Janer, who I received classes and interview from, to get valuable information about the bullerengue, which will be the main subject the connection in this research is based on. The bullerengue is a system of song dances that integrates percussion, dance, and song, original from the Bolivar region of Colombia. The evolution of these musical traditions occurred in the context of the Palenque communities. The term Palenque refers to the communities formed by Maroons, African slaves who rebelled against the colonial rules. It is preserved through oral tradition, in which it's necessary to highlight the leader role the woman and the drums have. In this way, cultural knowledge was transmitted to new generations. This meant that the communities preserved their traditions, however, they remained limited to the community and were unknown at the national level. A definition of bullerengue is generated from 4 rhythmic bases, which are also called airs, namely bullerengue sentado, bullerengue chalupeado, chalupa, and fandango en lengua. The common element being that each one of these airs of rhythmic bases has its own respective dance. In the bullerengue sentado, bullerengue chalupeado, and chalupa, there is a similarity in the time signature, each having a binary subdivision of 4/4 or 2/2. Meanwhile, the fandango en lengua has a time signature with ternary subdivision, a 6/8 bar. That is to say, the difference between the binary subdivision ones lies on the different speeds that characterize them, which allow the listener to sense the difference in the rhythmic bases between the 4 versions. In this research, I focused on 3 of these 4 bases, the binary subdivision ones, bullerengue sentado, bullerengue chalupeado, and chalupa. The bullerengue sentado is a restful bass that is characterized by being slow and sung by a pregnant woman. The dance also tends to be slow as it consists of rubbing the belly and chest. This is accompanied by songs that have to do with topics and situations of everyday context, vocal choral responses in the forms of ostinato, and a side drum that beats with rhythmical vocabulary typical of the African heritage and developed in these Colombian palenques. As a result, a combination of different rhythms is generated through the interaction between the side drummer and the vocals. On the other hand, the chalupa is the fastest air of these 3 mentioned before. It gets its name from the water transport used by slaves in the Dique Canal. On this journey, in order to release tension and fatigue, people used to sing while rowing against the current. The rhythms and song variety depending on whether they were rowing against the current of the Magdalena River, when the songs tended to be slower, or when they were descending with the current, where the rhythms and songs tended to be lively and fast. Finally, there is the bullerengue chalupeado, which is a combination of sentado and chalupa. This bass combines the characteristics of the other 2, but includes some modified accents. The bullerengue chalupeado also has a lot of internal variation, with different expressions by each palenque residing along the Dique Canal. This canal mention was built by the slaves to create a connection from the coast to the inland regions. The several palenques which formed along this canal are nowadays municipalities of the Bolivar region, which is recognized for its diverse folk music, drums, songs, dances, and music with different accents, which are commonly known as song dances. This research integrates semi-structured interviews to musicians who have had experience with genre fusions. Also, a strong focus is placed on transcriptions because those will make it possible to understand the process involved in this starting point of the compositions this research aims. The main reference and example to be transcribed is the Puerto Rican Miguel Zenón. The resources, tools, and key elements gotten in the transcriptions will be analyzed to allow the fulfillment of the outline objective, namely, the constitution of a musical proposal through compositions to make known the manner in which, in a personal way, a connection can be created between jazz and the traditional music latent in the bullerengue of the Atlantic coast of Colombia. In this case, I chose Miguel Zenón's arrangement of a classic salsa tune from the 80s decade composed by the legendary Ismael Rivera. This one was picked as it was a good example, where Miguel explicitly includes different elements from the jazz context, but also maintains strongly a similarity to the original version and making feel the difference between each other. The introduction of this arrangement is characterized by a melodic and rhythmic motif taken from the chorus section of the original version. This section is characterized by a structure based on a song improvisation that interacts with the chorus question and answer in 8 bars each. In Miguel Zenón's arrangement, the 8-bar phrase is imitated, but it's placed in a harmonic context with a different color to the original, although is preserved the logic of this motif. For his part, in Miguel's version, this melodic line is performed in exactly the same way, but then is contextualized in a different way by the piano accompaniment in a contrapuntal form, which integrates a line with modern sonorities outside the diatonic context, generating then tensions and voicings that are not common in the traditional Latin context. This tune is constructed on the bomba, which is a well-known and very used rhythm from Puerto Rico, and the piano, the bass, and the percussion section are playing established patterns for the whole tune. It is identified that in the arrangement an extra beat is added to the time signature in the second of these 2 bars motif, a 4/4 bar and a 5/4 bar, creating a big one of 9/4. Because of this second regular bar 5/4, the pickup of the motif has to be displaced for a whole beat. As I said before, this motif is taken from a fundamental piece in the bomba rhythm, being a constant in the accompaniment of the bass in the arrangement, as opposed to the added pulse. This motif is also implemented, serving as a meeting point throughout the arrangement. This section mentioned before, where Ismael Rivera directs the composition towards a sang improvisation, is a common resolve in the salsa style, where there is the presence of an element that is constant in traditional Latin music. It is the interaction. This element is shown in every salsa tune as a coro and pregón, an interaction between the choral vocal section and the singer leader of the band. As I said before, the use of this resource in the musics along all Latin America is very frequent, and it's not only implemented in the vocal section but also in the instrumental. To put an example, this resource is also obligatory in the Colombian first band's form structure, placed in the improvisation section, generating an interaction between the soloist and the rest of the band, which responds with an ostinato motif. This, in the same manner, is an essential resource even in the exposition of the melodies, interacting between the wind sections. The bullerengue wouldn't be the exception, being this interaction an obligated resource in this musical structural form. So Miguel Zenón is constantly implementing this resource in every fusion he proposes with his Puerto Rican roots. Here is only one example of many included along this arrangement, where this interaction is presented between the saxophone and the rhythm section, imitating the same rhythmic information but adding additional tensions in the voicing that give different and varied color, which are more common in the jazz side, while the drums is making the same role as the percussion section in the original version, which is maintaining the established patterns as stable as possible. This is something in the Latin technical lexico is called the march, which will be perceived in the jazz context as an stable groove. Here is an interesting point of the conception of the arrangement where Miguel, over the 9/4 bar bass established pattern, sees an opportunity to include concepts jazz has implemented in its development, as its polyrhythm and pulse modulation. This being so, the drums take the dotted quarter note as the so-called new pulse or alternative pulse, this new one being a ternary subdivision, above 9/8. 8 note equal 8 note. It should be noticed that these elements are not separate, but on the contrary coexist with each other all the time. One, two, three, four, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Another element that is very used and characteristic of jazz is the concept of soli, which is a fixed line, an arranger improvised line. In this case, it's in unison and is presented as a bridge to connect this previous section with the solos and between them. In this case, it gets to have a very traditional color at the beginning by being within the diatonic scale and by using articulations and ornamentation that are characteristic of Latin music. Now, what brings a different color away from the Latin side to this line is the addition of a second one in the left hand in the piano, the second time it is presented. After the solo section, he takes advantage of the triplet fill to make again a new pulse modulation, being this one a context of 12/8 bar to show what is the melodic line in the introduction of the original version. Even in the arrangement, it is a different velocity and subdivision, it conserves strongly its essence through the phrasing. Also, a common element is in the piano accompaniment, being the movement of one of the voices descending chromatically, which in the original version is a constant, the particle of movement of the voices in the piano's montuno. Montuno is a term referred to the piano particular accompaniment gestures in the salsa style. This element is included on purpose to conserve the color, to preserve the sense, and counterbalance the differences in the time aspect. On the other hand, another frequently used resource are the fixed breaks played tutti with a specific rhythmic Latin vocabulary, which are used to make transitions of pulse sensations or between the sections in the form structure. In the same way, long unison piano and saxophone or piano and bass fixed lines. The ambiguity of the two sides is shown very specific one next to each other, the first time in a very traditional or common way due to the diatonic sonority and rhythmic qualities. This shown over the same introduction's melody, this time in the same time context. And the second time in a different color, adding tensions that are more used in the context of modern jazz. Of these rhythmic bases to the drum set, where I counted with the help of my Spanish friend Hermenegildo Alcaraz to play these examples or some examples of the different patterns I proposed based on the information gotten from the classes with the side drummer Janet Amaris. So the first bass to approach in this section is the Bullerengue Sentado. This bass, as I said in the background, is the most stressful of the three I am approaching, especially as it is originated from a woman in a state of pregnancy, as a movement is made by rubbing the breasts and the belly while dancing slowly. By having this slow quality or characteristic, there is room to explore with the different sounds extracted from the principal side drum, the tambor alegre, which means literally happy side drum, thus combining timbal characteristics, pitches and volume. In this way, the possibility of almost making melodies with a single drum is generated, thus creating a rhythmic discourse but rich in accents around the interaction that this slow air gives the possibility to establish. Now let me contextualize you a bit by showing you a video of Janet about what other sounds can be extracted from the tambor alegre to create all these rhythmical lines. We call this open sound. We call this slap. This is the bell sound. We call this down or deep sound, and when it's played, the drum has to be lifted up. And this is the open and closed singing.
Canteo tapado, canteo abierto. Ya con estos sonidos podemos crear una base rítmica de nuestra música tradicional.
So now he will show how his mentor, the great Paulino Salgado Batata, showed him to play this sentado bass, which they first approached through onomatopeias referring to food words in this case. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yuca con pan y sal, maná, queso. Yuca con pan y sal, maná, queso. As you could notice, the established patterns turns out to be a small part of the rhythmic information that the language proposes, having a great richness and variety of ways of interacting. I also made several transcriptions of the most common rhythmic elements they use in the interaction, in order to understand the language and grow the rhythmic vocabulary in these traditions. But as we have a very limited time in this presentation, I will continue with the next air. Chalupa. This bass is the fastest and the most explosive one of the other three approaches. It is worth to mention that the speed generates possibilities or limitation at the moment of generating interaction, due to the fact that being a bass, it must maintain a constant pulse and be energetically active. That is to say, it requires additional attention, which limits the creative process or the spaces for interaction. On the other hand, this bass has two moments. First, the two-bar pattern, which is the established bass, and second, the quedadas, which are the one-bar pattern that generates a steady and consistent pulse. Certainly, within the rhythmic language of the Caribbean in general, it is possible to find a diversity of rhythm that can be assimilated to the bass of the chalupa. This happens because it has implicit one of the most implemented claves in the Caribbean, such as is the case of Miguel Zenon transcribed arrangement. So here are some examples of the chalupa bass in the drum set, where the key was to conserve the main accents. Example of the quedadas. And now we conserve the same bass, but we add a new element in the right cymbal. This polyrhythm element added in the right cymbal and the variation is taken from the Miguel Zenon arrangement example, where many possibilities arises from. And now let's move to the bullerengue charupiado. This bass is an hybrid between the two basses approached before, and it's considered special because it brings together the qualities of both. So it is rich in interaction. It can be thus low cadence, but also at the same time can generate an energetic strength. So it oscillates in speed and energy, getting closer to both. 1, 2, 1, 2. Pudu puda pudu pa, pudu puda tapa, pudu puda pudu pa, pudu puda tapa. And now we add a common interaction used very often. With this bass, a drumming approach a little more natural than the previous ones was generated, particularly because the possibility of using the basic drumming position, the right hand in the hi-hat and the left hand in the snare and the bass drum. There are many conclusions in common between the different informations gotten along the methodologies in the interviews with Giovanni Caldas and Juan Camilo Guapacha and through the transcriptions. One of the main conclusions are related to the phrasing aspect. This can reveal what side in the balance is taking place in a specific moment for having a lot of differences and contrast, but sometimes also both of them can become inflated, connected by coexisting. This aspect definitely gives an specific personality to every element approached. In the interview with Juan Camilo Guapacha, he makes the relevance he has the formation in the way the musical concept is more inclined to. For example, in the For Apache Band that he mentioned, another important Latin jazz reference this research focused on. What is relevant there is that the majority of the musicians in its formation are from North America, such as Steve Berrios on drums, Larry Willis on piano, Joe Ford on saxophone, and John Stuberfield on tenor saxophone. They are part of the conception Jerry Gonzalez gave from the jazz perspective to the Afro-Cuban. Therefore, into this jazz band playing mostly in its repertoire jazz standards, he added over it a variety of percussion instruments used in the Afro-Cuban traditions, the rumba, such as conga, claves, batas, and chekere, giving in this way to the musical concept the Latin side. So this is related to the ensemble formal aspect, which also has an impact in the path this concept will get to develop. And here can be mentioned what Giovanni Caldas in the interview emphasized on, which is the opposite approach of the connection as Jerry Gonzalez, since Giovanni conceived it from the Colombian Pacific tradition to the jazz, taking the traditional melodic gestures of the marimba incorporated into the piano, using the Colombian Pacific swing 8-note, which is the completely different and opposite as jazz swing 8-note, using the percussion set line of this Colombian tradition. So he says that at this point there is a field gained, which is going to explicitly use the patterns and rhythmic codes that belong to this tradition. So the percussionists start from interacting with the rhythmic language that they commonly used, and then adding into this different elements from the jazz in the aspects of form structure, harmonic textures, the phrasing shared improvisation, and the melodic lines, where he identifies jazz have had a big development. Something to mention in the discussion is that also the setbacks is part of the process. One of them is that by having a very tight schedule, it was difficult to get the interview programmed with the Miguel Zenon and Henry Cole as it was planned. Although they are still willing to take the time and make the meeting be online to share their perspective, which will be immense valuable for the continuation of this research. Another positive thing this research brought to the path of this development is the connection with Gianni Damaris, the sideroom player, who is really interested now of being an active part of the continuation of this process, which will be ideal to generate a very organic and strong result. Although there is still a lot of information and other sections to be mentioned in this presentation, as time has run out, you can still take a look at the document if you are interested. And I thank you everyone for your attention. Special thanks also to Rob Bruinen, my main subject teacher who supported me along this process, and also to Jesse and Matthias, my master coach, for the help and the patience.
Welcome back to the live room where we're having a Q&A now following the video presentation of Gustavo. Thank you for your presentation, Gustavo. Wow, I don't know where to begin. I was captivated. Let me first ask you, how do you feel the process that you've gone creatively, right? How do you feel that relates to the music itself, like the transition you're making, the new music you're making? How do you feel with things that you win from doing this morphing and things that you lose maybe from the original feel of the music? How does that relate to each other?
Well, actually it's a really interesting process because as I also am starting in this jazz world as a composer, because I'm quite new in this jazz world, but these elements give my cultural traditions have given me by being surrounded by, like give me these particular elements which I can interact with and develop in a way with those elements proposed as many musicians have done, you know, like there is a broad Latin, Afro-Cuban and Puerto Rican, which is really connected. I'm putting those examples because that's really connected to our roots. Like all the Caribbean has strong similarities, a lot of common elements. So by approaching this in this way, I am kind of opening my perspective and also knowing or rationalizing the information I have already got to do something with this. So like this is good for me as a starting point of which was the main purpose of this research, to get to know the way to create something from the tradition of from the things I've gotten from my process or my traditions. I don't know if I respond that question.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a nice answer. I like it. Any questions here in the jury? Not yet? Huh? Yeah. Great.
So yeah, in general, very nice. I mean, I really liked your choice of Miguel Zenon. It's a great saxophone player, and I saw him like, I don't know, still with like, you know, this San Francisco Chess Collective group, like a bigger group. Like it was like, I know they were like active. They were still active, but Miguel Zenon was playing there with Joshua Redman.
Oh yeah.
It's a great. I mean, the style of Miguel Zenon is so clear. You know, if you hear his few notes, you know, it's definitely Miguel Zenon. So I was really happy of your choice, and definitely it was a good choice. Yeah. What after, if you think after this work, this research, what did it bring you, the style of Miguel Zenon, let's say, to your own style? Rhythmically, melodically, I still remember that you mentioned that Miguel Zenon, what you appreciate in Miguel Zenon's style is that he is very rhythmical, yes, very characteristic, very rhythmical, and his phrases are pretty long, like kind of bebop phrases, like you would say, you would compare this to Charlie Parker phrases of stuff like this. So, what did you... I'm curious, what did it bring to you? Like more rhythmically or more melodically or both? Or, what's the influence actually, if you check at the point of view of now?
Yes, right. Actually, what I'm looking for by transcribing Miguel Zenon are the new sonorities he's putting into the natural things he can propose himself by his tradition. And also, like by many interviews I have seen from him, he says that this process has to be really organic from the music he has already getting into his system. Also, he has been really into the jazz. Like he was being transcribing a lot and surrounded by this jazz tradition, like following and having as a reference Charlie Parker, and so these rhythmical elements he really knows he got and he knows where to how to explore them by creating new ways and to maybe explore with the polyrhythms and like these facilities rhythmically he has, like to explore them. So maybe this could be a way to connect this development to maybe to explore about the rhythmical aspects and also include the other aspects as I also research about the form structure, the phrasing, the harmonic context, the textures, yes, and all these elements like can be connected, and which they have already done, like many musicians and in many contexts.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thanks. Great. Yeah, nice.
So how close for you is Miguel Zenon compared to, Puerto Rican, compared to your own Colombian context from Cali? Yes. How close is it? How far or close is it?
How far?
Apart, in terms of...
geographically.
Like the music,
And the music, no, it is really connected. Very connected, as I said before. The Caribbean region, which is huge, and which have a really strong diversity of rhythms and different concepts. Even though those diversity, there are really different some common elements, strong ones, such as the clave, as I mentioned, the kak, tak, con, ke, tak, con, ka, and there is a really broad variety of rhythm who fits in that key. That's why we have some different, like, for example, this chalupa bass fits in almost all the Puerto Rican styles on rhythms, like the plena, the bomba. They are really connected. They have really strong common elements. So that's why I chose him to have the reference from.
Yeah. And in your in the conclusion part of your video, you showed us a little part of your own bullerengue that you were playing here in school as well. How do you feel now, reflecting on that composition? How do you look back at that? Does it feel like it's the combination you were looking for?
Yes, it is a starting point, but I'm looking for something else. Like maybe I'm having different ideas. This was maybe like the first thing I was making from my intuitive approach, But now that I got all these elements which I can include there, like now I can settle and rationalize and set some limits at the time to create something. Also, I mentioned in the document the differences or the roles of the rational decisions at the time of composing, and also like the sensitive or the abstract decisions or just natural organic, and it has to do with the as I said before, the context you have been surrounded by, and also like the academy, what the academy also gives to you as that's why I'm also here getting doing a jazz masters to get a jazz elements to mix there.
Great. More questions, audience. Yeah, oh, of course, Julia. What? Oh, Tim as well. Yeah, behind me. This is always my blind spot.
So you're very far away from home here in Maastricht, and you're also in a new world of jazz. And I'm wondering what you learned from these new environments, like taking your cultural context into a new environment that you weren't expecting, because to you it's implicit, like you already know it. But when you had to share it with other people with different background, what was surprising to you about that process?
Well, something I've been learning and I've been sharing to some of you this perspective is that and especially with Rob, which I have discussed a lot about that, is the things I didn't know I knew about the things, my environment, like the things that are obvious for us are not obvious for everyone. So that's why I just like incline this presentation to the contextualization and historical like kind of historical context, and the things I've learned are more like to identify what elements I can explore and make myself like I have different from the difference I have, you know?
Yeah. But what kind of specific maybe mentality about making music surprised you about this process?
Okay. Yeah, actually, there is a lot of things because and I have been opening my perspective as here everyone has its own world in his head, and which is a thing doesn't happen really common there, because we are kind of listening the same music, approaching the music in the same way, and here are really different approaches and diversity, and everyone respects every different opinion. So that's one thing I've been learning through sharing this environment with you, like to just listen and understand, and every word everyone has it in his head, you know, like that's maybe a thing. I don't know if I understand your question, but
Great. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your great presentation first. So I kind of have two questions. I think the music that you've been analyzing and dealing with has a function that is mainly to dance to, right? And people come together and they have a great time. And now you're taking this into this jazz world, and sometimes at concerts you see people rather, you know, sitting like this, and it's a rather serious environment for this music, right? And I think you're going to come to a chapter where you write some music with this new influence, right? And I think I'm asking myself, where do you see your music? Is it going to be a music with an audience to dance to, and like everyone is making the music together, like a happening? Or is it more going to be this? Or do you maybe see the jazz part of your music as an extension to the just dance function of the music originally?
Yeah,
I hope it's clear.
yeah, that's interesting because everyone, we have the same approaches. We hear the same music. We are surrounded by the same musics. Everyone has its own. It's inclined to one or the way. So and I think this connotation of the music for the people to dance has been changing through the history, even in the Afro-Cuban, as he was introduced by Mario Bauzá to New York, and at the beginning he was playing and composing and performing in dance halls, and then it started changing because of the jazz approach, which has a really different space and public, and it was a music for hearing. So this also was part of the development in the jazz gave to the dances. Like music for dance, like, of course we don't want to lose these specific elements and aspects, because I think that's the thing, it makes it interesting, and the rhythmical part, and it of course implicit has the movement and the dances inside the music, but it can be maybe camouflated the other side and by bringing different elements as
and like, if it's your music, how do you picture it in your mind? Is there this audience that is dancing with you, or is it different?
Well, yeah, I haven't imagined that yet, but no, but that's interesting because in this context we expect the people to hear the music, but if they want to move, that's incredible, and I would love the people just move with the music I make, and it would be lovely to see people dancing with my music.
I'd be interested in that.
Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? I think it's perfect. We're gonna wrap it up with that. Thank you so much for your Q&A and for your presentation. Once more, applause. Thank you.
Thank you.